Reading of the respiratory system. Functions of the respiratory system. Can you imagine an astronaut walking on the moon without a spacesuit? Or a diver exploring the ocean without scuba gear? Of course not. You couldn't survive in either location under those conditions because you need to breathe air. Earth is surrounded by a layer of gases called atmosphere. You breathe atmospheric gases that are closest to Earth, as shown in Figure 1. Oxygen is one of those gases. For thousands of years, people have known that air, food, and water are needed for life. However, the gas in the air that is necessary for life was not identified as oxygen until the late 1700s. At that time, a French scientist experimented and discovered that an animal breathed in oxygen and breathed out carbon dioxide. He measured the amount of oxygen that the animal used and the amount of carbon dioxide produced by its bodily processes. After his work with animals, the French scientist used his knowledge to study the way that humans use oxygen. He measured the amount of oxygen that a person uses when resting and when exercising. These measurements were compared, and he discovered that the more oxygen is used by the body during exercise. Figure 1 shows the percentages of gases in our air. Most of our air is 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. A little thin slice here of carbon dioxide, argon, and other gases. Other gases could be things like helium. Figure 2 shows the process of respiration. Sugar plus oxygen results in the release of carbon dioxide, water vapor, and energy. This is what happens in our cells all the time. Breathing and respiration. People often confuse these terms. Breathing and respiration. Breathing is the movement of the chest that brings air into the lungs and removes waste gas. Deep breath. The air entering the lungs contains oxygen. It passes from the lungs into the circulatory system because there is less oxygen in the blood than in cells of the lungs. Blood carries oxygen to individual cells. At the same time, the digestive system supplies glucose from digested food to the same cells. The oxygen delivered to the cell is used to release energy from glucose. This chemical reaction shown in the equation in Figure 2 is called cellular respiration. Without oxygen, this reaction would not take place. Carbon dioxide and water molecules are waste products of cellular respiration. They are carried back to the lungs in the blood. Exhaling or breathing out eliminates waste carbon dioxide and some other water molecules. Remember, respiration is different than breathing. Breathing is just simply bringing the air in, but respiration deals with breaking down glucose molecules and using oxygen to do that to release carbon dioxide, water, and of course energy to run the cell in the mitochondria. Now let's look at the organs of respiration of the respiratory system. The respiratory system, shown in Figure 3, is made up of structures and organs that help move oxygen into the body and waste gases out of the body. Air enters your body through two openings in your nose called nostrils, or through the mouth. Fine hairs inside the nostril trap dust from the air. Air then passes through the nasal cavity, where it gets moistened and warmed by the body's heat. Glands that produce sticky mucus line the nasal cavity. The mucus traps dust, pollen, and other materials that were not trapped by nasal hairs. This process helps filter and cleans the air you breathe. Tiny hair-like structures called cilia sweep mucus and trap materials in the back of the throat where it can be swallowed. The pharynx. Warmed, moist air enters the pharynx, which is a tube-like passageway used for food, liquid, and air. At the lower end of the pharynx is a flap of tissue called the epiglottis. When you swallow, your epiglottis folds down to prevent food or liquid from entering your airway. The food enters your esophagus instead. What do you think has happened if you began to choke? Well, if you began to choke, what has happened is the epiglottis did not close, and something is blocking your airway. Next section, the pharynx. Warmed, moist air then enters the pharynx, which is a tube-like passageway where food, liquid, air goes. I just read that part. So here, this figure shows you nasal cavity, mouth cavity, pharynx, larynx, the trachea, the lungs, vocal cords, muscles. The tighter your cords, the higher the pitch of the sound. It says about 300 million alveoli are in each lung. They exchange the carbon dioxide, and environment takes place between the alveoli and the surrounding capillaries. Next section, the larynx and trachea. Next, the air moves into your larynx. The larynx is the airway to which two pairs of horizontal folds of tissue called vocal cords are attached, as shown in Figure 3. Let's get back to Figure 3, which is right here. And there's your larynx right in this section. The larynx is the airway which two pairs of horizontal folds of tissue called vocal cords are attached, as Figure 3. Forcing air between the cords causes them to vibrate and produce sound. When you speak, muscles tighten or loosen your vocal cords, resulting in different sounds. Your brain coordinates the movement of the muscles in your throat, tongue, cheeks, and lips when you talk, sing, or just make noise. Your teeth also are involved in forming letter sounds and words. From the larynx, air moves into the trachea, which is a tube about 12 centimeters in length. Strong C-shaped rings of cartilage prevent the trachea from collapsing. The trachea is lined with mucous membranes and cilia, as shown in Figure 3, that trap dust, bacteria, and pollen. Why must the trachea stay open at all times? To let air in and out. Bronchi in the lungs. Air is carried into your lungs by two short tubes called bronchi, singular bronchus, at the lower end of the trachea. Within the lungs, the bronchi branch into smaller and smaller tubes. The smallest tubes are called bronchioles. At the end of each bronchiole are clusters of tiny thin-walled sacs called alveoli. Air passes into the broncho, and then into the bronchioles, and then finally into the alveoli. As shown in Figure 3, lungs are masses of alveoli arranged in grape-like clusters. The capillaries surround the alveoli are like a net. The exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide take place between the alveoli and the capillaries. This easily happens because the walls of the alveoli, single alveolus, and the walls of the capillaries are each only one cell thick, as shown in Figure 4. Let's find Figure 4. It's right here, and you see it's just one cell thick, so things can pass through. Oxygen moves through the cell membranes of the alveoli and then through the cell membranes of the capillaries into the blood. There, the oxygen is picked up by the hemoglobin, a molecule in red blood cells, and carried to all the body cells. At the same time, carbon dioxide and other cellular waste leave the body cells. The waste moves through the cell membranes of the capillaries, and then they are carried by the blood. In the lungs, waste gases move through the cell membranes of the capillaries and through the cell membranes of the alveoli, and then waste gases leave the body during exhalation. Why do you breathe? Signals from your brain tell your muscles in your chest and abdomen to contract and relax. You don't have to think about breathing to breathe, just like your heart beats without you telling it to beat. Your brain can change your breathing rate depending on the amount of carbon dioxide present in your blood. If a lot of carbon dioxide is present, your breathing rate increases. It decreases if less carbon dioxide is in your blood. You have some control over your breathing. You can hold your breath if you want to. Eventually, though, your brain will respond to the buildup of carbon dioxide in your blood. The brain's response will tell your chest and abdomen muscles to work automatically, and you will breathe whether you want to or not. Inhaling and exhaling. Breathing is partly the result of changes in air pressure. Under normal condition, a gas moves from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure. When you squeeze an empty soft plastic bottle, the air is pushed out. This happens because the air pressure outside of the top of the bottle is less than the pressure you create inside the bottle when you squeeze. As you release your grip on the bottle, the air pressure inside the bottle becomes less than the outside the bottle, and the air rushes back in, the bottle returns to its original shape. Your lungs work in a similar way to the squeezed bottle. Your diaphragm is a muscle beneath your lungs that contracts and relaxes to help move gases in and out of your lungs. Figure 5 illustrates breathing. That's figure 5. There's this muscle line down here is the diaphragm. As you inhale, exhale, it pushes up. Inhale, it pushes down to open and close the lungs. When a person is choking, a rescuer can use an abdominal thrust as shown in figure 6 to save the life of a choking victim. And figure 6 shows us the famous Heimlich maneuver. Putting the hands underneath, pushing upward force, and forces the trachea open. The Heimlich maneuver. This next section talks about some diseases that can affect the breathing. Diseases and disorders of the respiratory system. If you were asked to list some of the things that can harm your respiratory system, you probably would put smoking at the top. As you can see in Table 1, many serious diseases are related to smoking. The chemical substances in tobacco, nicotine, and tars are poisonous and can destroy cells. The high temperatures of smoke, carbon monoxide, produced when tobacco burns can also injure a smoker's cells. Even if you are a non-smoker, inhaling smoke from tobacco products such as secondhand smoke is unhealthy and has the potential to harm your respiratory system. Smoking pollutes it. Polluted air, coal dust, and asbestos have been related to respiratory problems such as bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma, and cancer. Respiratory infections. Bacteria, viruses, and other organisms of the respiratory system. The common cold usually affects the upper part of the respiratory system, from the nose to the pharynx. The cold virus also can cause irritation and swelling in the larynx, trachea, and bronchi. The cilia that line the trachea and bronchi can be damaged. However, cilia usually heal rapidly. A virus that causes influenza or flu can affect many of the body's systems. The virus multiplies in the cells lining the alveoli and damages them. Pneumonia is an infection of the alveoli that can be caused by bacteria, viruses, or other microorganisms. Before antibiotics were available to treat these infections, many people died from pneumonia. Interesting note, the coronavirus, or COVID-19, is a virus that affects the respiratory system. Chronic bronchitis. When bronchial tubes are irritated and swell too much, mucus is produced. A disease called bronchitis develops. Sometimes bacterial infections occur in the bronchial tubes because the mucus there provides nearly ideal conditions for bacteria to grow. Antibiotics are effective treatment for these types of bronchitis. Many cases of bronchitis clear up within a few weeks, but there are some diseases that last for a long time. When this happens, it's called chronic bronchitis. A person who has chronic bronchitis must cough often to try to clear the excess mucus from the airways. However, the more a person coughs, the more cilia and bronchial tubes may be harmed. When cilia are damaged, they cannot move mucus, bacteria, and dirt particles out of the lungs effectively. Then harmful substances such as sticky tar from burning tobacco build up in the airways. Sometimes scar tissues form, and the respiratory system cannot function properly. This paragraph talks about emphysema. Emphysema, a disease in which the alveoli of the lungs enlarge, is called emphysema. When cells in the alveoli are reddened and swollen, an enzyme is released that can cause the walls of the alveoli to break down. As a result, the alveoli can't push air through the lungs, so less oxygen moves into the bloodstream from the alveoli. When the bloodstream is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide, shortness of breath occurs. Some people with emphysema require extra oxygen, as shown in Figure 7. This is an old book. You see this giant oxygen tank. A lot of people have those very small ones now that they carry. Because the heart works harder to supply oxygen to the body cells, people with emphysema often develop heart problems as well. Normal healthy lung, damaged lung. Lung cancer is the third leading cause of death of men and women in the United States. Is lung cancer. Inhaling tar and cigarette smoke is the greatest contributing factor to lung cancer. Tar and other ingredients such as smoke act as carcinogens in the body. Carcinogens are substances that can cause uncontrolled growth of cells in the lungs. This is called lung cancer. Lung cancer is not easy to detect in its early stages. Smoking has been linked to development of cancers in the mouth, esophagus, larynx, pancreas, kidney, and bladder. Enough said, we all know that smoking is very bad for you. That goes for vaping as well. Asthma. This one is familiar to us. Shortness of breath, wheezing, and coughing can occur in a lung disorder called asthma. When a person has an asthma attack, the bronchial tubes contract quickly. Inhaling medicine that relaxes the bronchial tubes is usually a treatment for asthma attack. Asthma is often an allergic reaction. An allergic reaction occurs when the body overreacts to a foreign substance. An asthma attack can result from breathing certain substances such as cigarette smoke, plant pollen, eating certain foods, or stress in a person's life. Sometimes exercise can cause an asthma attack. So that is our reading of the respiratory system. I hope you found this informative, and thanks for tuning in. I'll scroll back up to the top. And this has been Mr. Ruby. See you on the YouTube.